Hello and welcome back to This Is Our Story. You are here with your hosts, me, Kieran McCallion, and my sister, Briar. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. We're into episode 4 now of our story so far. I must confess it is getting easier. The first couple of episodes felt like a little bit of a slog, as was expected. I kind of feel like we may have not quite hit the points that we wanted to in the very beginning, but it is getting much easier to get through this, and feels like it's flowing a lot more. Any reflections on your experience so far, Brian, in terms of, a lot of this stuff we haven't really talked about systematically together. How has the experience been for you so far?
Yeah, like you say, I think it's getting easier, and obviously our memories are more vague from back then, so we've probably missed a few key things, but I think we may even think about them later on and can jump back to it. But now we're getting into sort of some more heavy duty stuff of really what the foundations of who we are today. So
yeah, and these particular years that we're discussing, the teenage years, were really instrumental, as they are for every person, I'm sure. But this was the stage of life when things really were setting us up for the next chapters that were kind of where we experienced all of our trauma, because it's tempting to come across like our upbringing was rough, and it wasn't. To make
Definitely
that clear, it really wasn't
Definitely
rough.
wasn't.
And we're not here to moan about the way that our parents brought us up in general.
Just a little bit.
Okay, there's a little bit of moaning, but everyone moans about their parents a little bit, right? But it's more about dissecting the way that they did things and the context of where we were, and just kind of seeing how that directed the directions. Just to kind of talk about dissecting the direction that we ended up heading after we left home, because that's when all the messy stuff really started happening. That's when I started to get really fucked up. It wasn't that I was messed up when I was a kid. It's just that set me up in a certain way, made me react to situations in a certain way.
And we were very naive. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I think it was. I think in terms of when we're talking about the way that we grew up, it was more about us being unaware of what the real world was really like. And when you're young, no one is really aware of the world, because generally we see things through innocent eyes as children, and that's the way it's supposed to be. I can't really necessarily fault my parents or our parents on too many things, but we definitely missed out on some stuff that would have been really helpful. And the things we missed out on, which we kind of hit a little bit in the last episode, relationships and things, were some of the key trigger points for a lot of the trauma that both you and I don't want to exaggerate and use the word suffer, but there was definitely some suffering involved, which we will delve into more deeply in future episodes. However, as pointed out in the last episode, we want to not always be doom and gloom, and we want to provide a chance to share some stories of perhaps lighter times, more fun times of things that we did as a family or with friends, or even just on our own. And the segment is called Story Time. Story Time, yes. I do love stories.
Not heard that one before.
So the last story time focused on pastimes, and we had some interesting things to share there about stories, and stories that Bri used to make up with her friends, and also that I used to make up with my friends as well, and also about kind of strolling around on the farm with an air rifle and shooting things with hopeless abandon. But this time around, we're going to actually briefly talk about, I don't know if you can hear some very loud kookaburras in the background.
Give away of your location.
I'm in Australia, obviously. We're going to talk about holidays this time around, and I'm going to start off by talking about our family holidays in the South Island. Now, we're actually really lucky in this respect that we got to explore New Zealand at all, because many families that I grew up with, in the far north especially, never got to see other parts of New Zealand. And indeed, people I know now still have not seen large parts of New Zealand. And I feel very grateful that we had an opportunity to hit the road and see some of the amazing sights that New Zealand has to offer. But we actually did 2 separate trips down to the South Island. And the thing that actually set these off was that my best friend, who I had briefly mentioned a couple of episodes ago, we used to spend, I can't remember how long we'd known each other for, but it was years. We spent a lot of time together. Anyway, he moved away. He moved down to a very small town called Fairlie in Canterbury in the South Island of New Zealand. Pretty much, I can't even really think of, I have no idea. I don't know much about Fairlie. Maybe I could just quickly look that up.
There's not a lot there. There's a school, there's a bakery, or back then anyway. There wasn't a lot there.
Well, the population of Fairlie, I mean, this may have changed, but in 2018 was 885 people.
Yeah, and this was in the 90s that we were down there.
Yeah. I mean, it was small, very, very small. It's more like a village, really. And so his dad got a job as a principal at the high school down there. And so they packed up and left. And it was hard. Like, as I've talked about before, I didn't have many friends. And so to have my best friend all of a sudden leave, and it was quite sudden. And yeah, he got the job and they left quite soon after. It was heartbreaking, actually, heartbreaking. We used to do phone calls, I remember, maybe a couple of times a week. And back in the days when we had landlines. And I
remember Philip used to ask you, what time is it there?
Yeah. Yeah, he was a bit of a character. So, yeah, we went to go down and visit them. And I have no memory of what year this was, but it would have been late 90s or early 2000s.
Yeah, we were young teens, I think, early teens.
Yeah, and what did we do? We flew into Christchurch and then we drove across to Fairlie, which was kind of in the middle of Canterbury, and it's very isolated out there, very isolated. And we basically hung out with them for must have been a week or so.
Oh, it felt like so much longer.
I don't know. I don't know. When you're a kid, right, everything feels super, super long. But we went on two trips, and I believe they were the year after each other. And it was our first time in the South Island, and I just remember it being so bloody cold in April.
Well, coming from the far
one year
north.
It was snowing. Some very clear memories of that time is, so in New Zealand they had massive issues with rabbits back then, like millions and millions of rabbits taking over the countryside. And I very clearly remember the first trip, you could almost see the hills move. There were just so many rabbits there, it looked like the hills were moving. That was around Lake Tekapo. But I mean, if you've ever been to the South Island of New Zealand, it's just amazing. It's incredible. There's very few places on earth that are as beautiful. So very, very lucky to see that as a child. And in that first trip together, I have a vague recollection that we went in a camper van. Was it a camper van? And we went up the west coast of New Zealand and we visited Franz Josef Glacier. We went onto the glacier. That was pretty awesome. With our crampons and freezing our asses off.
Only wearing a tracksuit.
I was thoroughly unprepared for that. But what was crazy about that is that was kind of the biggest trip that we ever did as a family. And to be honest, I don't think we haven't done family trips since then. Not together as a family. Yeah,
I went to Rarotonga, but
yes, I mean we've done things separately. So I went on a trip with Mum and Dad in the UK a few years back, but nothing with all of us together. So yeah, that was pretty awesome. And can't really remember the difference between the first trip and the second trip, except the second one. The one I do remember is because it was quite controversial at the time in New Zealand, but they brought in this poison for the rabbits. What was it called? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
Anyway, it was devastatingly effective, and we came back the following year and there was just 0 rabbits to be found.
And it's never been like that again.
Yeah, it's starting to get bad again, actually. Because they've built up an immunity to that poison. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, that was probably the coolest family holiday that we've done, or holidays, I should say. I mean, we did have one other recurring holiday that we went to on a family, in which you're going to talk about, Bro.
Yeah, so every summer we used to go camping at a place called Kaiwi Lakes, which was about, how far would that be? Maybe a couple of hours from where we lived, maybe 2 hours outside of Dargaville. And it's the most incredible place to go camping. Like, if you can picture like beautiful old tall pine trees, like the whitest sand you've ever seen. And it's a natural lake, so over the years it's just filled with rainwater, so it's crystal clear and such a deep lake. And
incredible, like scary deep.
Yeah, like it would be beautiful clear water, and then it would just drop off into nothingness, and it was so dark, like you'd try and dive down as far as you could, and it was so dark you couldn't see anything.
Yeah, very scary.
A popular spot.
So
in
it was.
summertime.
I remember it was flat for maybe 50 meters, right, and then all of a sudden just would drop off into nothing.
Yeah, very popular in summer, and we'd go for 2 weeks at a time every year, and we had a big tent, like a 3-bedroom tent, and we used to go with friends of ours from, the Cooks. I guess we met at church, and they kind of became very close friends, and they or basically like family, because we didn't spend a lot of time with our actual cousins who lived not too far from us, which was Mum's side of the family.
And so all of Dad's family were in Auckland, so and they never visited basically.
No. So we spent a lot of time, and they just became, like family to us.
De facto extended family.
Yeah, and they were a big family of 11. They didn't all come with us because some of them were older and left home, but there was maybe 4 of their kids that used to come with us every year. So it was a big deal. Like we'd go and put all our tents together, and I just have such great memories of barbecuing, sweet corn every night and complaining about who was going to be washing up in the bucket of hot water, and back then they didn't even have warm showers. It was cold showers, so you just have to sort of
long drop toilets.
Yeah, grin and bear it. And so
no flushing toilets, literally just a wooden frame.
Yeah,
and then you sit on and then wait for the for the bombs to land.
That part not so great, but it was just amazing. And our friends, they had a boat, and they took water skis and the biscuit, and we'd just have the best days of our lives out on the lake in the summertime.
Yeah, and, it's very classic New Zealand holiday, summer holiday actually. I remember playing Spotlight because, I mean, think about this for a second. We had like a lot of rules at home, and we weren't allowed to stay up late. We didn't really do anything fun. So when we were away camping, it was kind of like Mum and Dad just stopped. Yeah, they just kind of relaxed all the rules.
Yeah.
And we just kind of did whatever we wanted almost. But obviously we were super responsible anyway most of the time, so they could. But
the parents, none of them drank alcohol, obviously. So, but they would stay up late playing card games and laughing and joking, and us kids would just go off into the pine trees and look for possums in the trees and
play
just explore till ridiculously late. So
Spotlight, like what is it, like hide and seek with a flashlight at night.
And then during the day you'd have afternoon naps in the sun. It was just the best. Like I have such a romantic memory of that time, the summers camping. I mean, it's awesome.
Everything about those memories is good. Even sometimes we make things look rosy when we look back, but I don't really think anything was bad about that. Those times. And it was probably about 5 years in a row or maybe 4, that we did it while I was at home, and then you continued when I left. But
even when you left home, you came back with your girlfriend at the time, and she joined us on those trips. So it was something that we really valued, that time together as family and with our close family friends. So yeah, definitely they're like core memories for me. I don't know about you, but they're definitely core memories for me.
Yeah, and we were super lucky to have that, and it was great to have that because it did feel like a family experience with the Cooks. And it wasn't just this that we would do with them, right? So I remember we had a lot of our core memories of things on farms were with them, going and
milking the cows
and just kind of doing all sorts of dirty shit on the farm, getting dragged behind a 4-wheel motorbike.
Sorry, that was an emergency alert that just came up on my phone.
Was that like some kind of storm warning or something?
No, it's a test. Oh. They did tell us on the TV that was going to happen.
That shit never happens here. Yeah, so I mean, we were really tight with the Cooks, and even now, like, mum and dad are still close with the family. But yeah, I guess if we want to like segue from that into I guess talking about the church experience and the youth experience as being quite family orientated. Because it was such a small community, a lot of those people that we knew from that time did become like de facto family members. And some of my closest friends, all of my closest friends were a part of that church and a part of that youth group as well. And there was one family in particular for me. I became very close with the guy. He was a year or so older than me. We became very tight, and we did a lot of things together. And incidentally, it was his sister that I ended up having a big crush on, which I referred to very briefly in the last episode. That was probably the only time where there was a confusing boundary between the family and not family. But, a lot of these people that were in church and youth group and stuff, we spent so much time with them, not only during services or youth related things, but just throughout the week, or church stuff outside of the church building, so to speak. I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the specific things that we did as a youth group, though, because I think it was quite interesting. And I wanted to discuss the missions that we used to go on. And so basically the idea was, and I was trying to think about this today, actually, about how this evolved, because we had a youth group come and do some kind of outreach event at our church. And I can't remember, this may have been a year or so before I left to go to uni, but they were visiting from Tauranga. And coincidentally, this was a church that I ended up being a part of, but they came along and had a big outreach event, and the music was great, and they had dances and they had plays, and they were all very exciting with it was basically just a bunch of young people having a lot of fun. And that was really impacting on me because it just looked cool and it sounded cool and the people were very cool. Too cool for me, I felt at the time. Like I couldn't quite fit in. I really wanted to meet these people and chat with them, but they were there for a few days, I think. And I think they stayed in the church.
Or I feel like they got billeted out to families.
Yeah, I don't quite remember the details of that, but I remember trying to get to know them and then not quite fitting in, but really wanting to. But yeah, the girls were pretty, the singers were great, the musicians were amazing. And I was like, this is really what going to church should be like. And that's quite important for my journey, because that's basically what I looked for every time I tried to find a new church. It was
very much about the image, though, that church, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
To draw you in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the whole idea. It was outreach. It wanted to be, they were trying to be exciting, to bring people in and then save them, basically. That's the whole idea of being in a church like that. Anyway, I think we may have taken the idea from these guys, and we wanted to do our own outreach with our youth. And we had a core group of youth who were involved in music and just youth activities. And so we decided to do this outreach tour. And were you a part of this? I can't remember.
I was a part of a few, but I can't remember.
Because this was one of the more fun things that I was involved with. And I don't think I really took it seriously because it was just fun. But we went to a bunch of local churches in the far north, like around Whangarei, and I don't remember how far south we went, but
I know we went to Ruakaka.
Yeah, and as a group of people, musicians and stuff, we weren't great. And I say this without judgment or without sounding or attempting to not sound up myself, but I did often get compliments for my drumming, and I was pretty good, if I'm honest, for my age. But a lot of the other things, that the music that we did was quality was questionable. But I remember, like, we would do these events and we would do all these songs, and then just no one would be there. There'd be like 5 people.
Oh, cringe.
It's so cringy. We would do so much practice, so much preparation for this.
Oh, man.
And and then just no one would show up because we'd be visiting these tiny churches in the middle of nowhere. What do we expect? Like probably like 50 people who live in these little towns.
What a shame.
I don't know what we were hoping for, but we believed it was time for revival, and we would have these prayer meetings, get very excited about God doing a move in this little town, and then it'd be just I kid you not, every single time we outnumbered the people who came to visit.
Well, there was quite a few of us.
Surprise, really. We had a great time because it was like going on a fun trip with your friends, and it was quite an inclusive group. So I think the youth pastor tried to include as many people as possible. But yeah, no, very clear memories of that. You weren't. I don't know if you came along to any of those.
I definitely did, but I don't remember if that was later on, like after you'd left, or if you were there. I definitely went to quite a few. Yeah, I definitely remember going to one in Ruakaka, and a few around the North Island. But yeah, I can't remember if you were part of that. And I also felt like I was, I didn't have any particular talent. I couldn't really sing. I couldn't dance. There's a lot of stuff I couldn't do. But I was there. I was participating. I was a number.
Well, that was the whole thing in church, I think, is just being involved was, at least for these smaller churches, the importance was placed on just being involved. When I went to bigger churches, it was more about being good at what you did and being excellent. And if you weren't an excellent musician, you would be kind of pushed aside into a different area, like being a welcomer or something. And that there was a different hierarchical type system of talent in bigger churches. But for us, we were just a tiny church where just having people there was important. But like a specific experience, which I was just relating to you before, was not connected with these trips, but just there were a core group of us in the youth group at the time, who were a little bit older, had been around a longer while, and the youth pastor wanted to kind of invest in us a little bit more, and it was decided that we would have this kind of special cell group just for us, and we were kind of considered senior leaders almost, or not leaders as such, but just senior members. We didn't get any title or anything, although I felt very important to be a part of this. And
a chosen one.
Kind of, and I only know this in hindsight, but like I've had a lot of experiences throughout my church journey of wanting to be that chosen person for anything really. The importance of being noticed and appreciated has been quite a big part of my religious journey. But basically, we would get together maybe once a week, and we would have a Bible study, and each of us would take turns in sharing Bible study. I remember I did one which, in hindsight, I think is quite good. Like, it's quite. I said some good things. Yes, pretty good at blowing trumpet. And I remember getting a real thrill out of the compliments that I received for my message that I shared. But we kind of encouraged this culture within this small group of being close and being able to share parts of our personal journey that we perhaps wouldn't share with other parts of the group. And I've very distinctly,
like confessing your sins.
Kind of, yeah. One particular and very uncomfortable moment. Oh God, it's cringy even when I think about it. We were just going around sharing about things that had been going on with us, or things that just reflecting on what had been hard for us lately or something. And then one guy pops up. It's like, so I've been having some trouble with impure thoughts, and these impure thoughts are kind of leading me to, do things that I don't think I should be doing. And oh my God, my heart just beats faster now thinking about the awkwardness. And all of a sudden it was like, as we mentioned last time, right? guys and girls, we can't talk about these things together. So, and one of the older girls, she was like, oh, you know what? I think we should probably leave. And so she went out with the other couple of girls who were there, and it was just the boys. So we had this very awkward conversation about, without using the exact words, about masturbation and porn, but so awkward that I came out the end of it not with no practical knowledge about how to deal with those feelings or those actions at all. Like I got nothing out of that. So again, avoiding all that sex ed talk. It could have been constructive and it could have been helpful, but it was neither of those things. Missed opportunity. Like seriously, could anything be handed on a platter more easily?
That must have been so brave of him though to speak that, considering in the Christian circles that is not talked about. Like that's so brave of him.
Well, that was the next part of the awkward nature of the conversation, because everyone came back together again, and then they were talking about how you were so brave to share that with us, and I just want to, it's just so amazing that we feel so comfortable to be able to share these things together.
He probably went home and cried because he felt so uncomfortable.
And all I was thinking was like, fuck, I've done those things, but I'm not going to talk about it.
No. It's like, what is this thing you speak of?
Yeah, because I'm totally innocent. I never have impure thoughts. Yes. Bri, you mentioned you wanted to talk a little bit about the whole speaking in tongues thing, and maybe just like explain what that is, because it's a very weird concept.
Yeah, I guess for those people who haven't been in the religious world, you may have heard the term speaking in tongues, and basically it's a language that Christian people use to talk to God.
Heavenly language is what they...
Yeah, that's a heavenly language. And when I was part of youth group, this was something that I had said to my youth leader at the time. I said, look, I don't know how to do it. Like, and this was embarrassing for me. Like, I should know.
Well, because there's a lot of pressure on because it's like you're deficient. You have a deficiency if you can't communicate in this heavenly language, because obviously any true Christian, evangelical Christian, should be able to do this, and if you can't, there's something that's holding you back.
And I thought at the time that it was a reflection on my relationship with God. Like, has he not given me this ability, or like, why is it that I cannot speak in tongues? And the advice that was given to me was just to practice. And by practice, I mean, I'm not even kidding, right? He told me to just start by saying, this is so cringy, like shibidabudu. Like, it's laughable, right? But
this whole thing of speaking tongues, like, I'm not going to bash it too much because this is important for many people. But it is nuts. Like, everyone is basically making these weird noises, and everyone claims that that they're speaking in this language that the God and the angels can understand. The concept is so out of this world.
It's out the gate. It really is.
Oh man, it's nuts.
And so it was quite weird. So when I'm at home, I was being a good child and reading my Bible, and I was practicing speaking in tongues, and it sounded so weird to myself. Like, I was like, this is what I've been told to do. I'll just keep doing it, and then maybe it'll come more naturally. And I kind of ran out of like sheeby-doobies to say, like how many times can you say sheeby-doobie and think, what am I saying to God?
Like, sure hope that God's listening really closely.
It's like, I hope you can translate this, God, because I don't know what I'm saying. But it just, it got to the point where it became more fluent, if you like. And so you were encouraged to do it in church, in those moments during worship where they sort of just play instrumental music, and that's your chance to speak in this language to God. And it was. And then I remember feeling quite like I didn't want people to judge my version of the language. Like, what if they thought I was talking rubbish? Well, obviously I was, but
I mean, everyone's talking rubbish.
Yeah,
and it all sounds different.
I was worried about that judgment, but I was like, this is how I've been taught. So I'm just going to
It's
carry
basically
on.
like jazz scatting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because I mean, from memory,
time.
this happened to you before me, because I couldn't, and I don't. Even it's weird to talk about the concept of not being able to speak a gibberish language.
Like, to someone who's not been brought up in this way, like when I speak to my partner about this, he's like, "What?"
When you're outside the bubble, it's so hard to understand.
Yeah,
it's an
he
integral
actually finds
part
it mind blowing.
Being an evangelical Christian, and no one ever says anything directly to make you feel like you're not good enough, but it's so implied. So, for example, you might get someone up on the stage saying, all of those who can speak in tongues, speak out now, and let's believe that we're going to break down the walls of someone such and such. And so all of a sudden, you're the only one who's not. And so you just kind of, but now, like, I've heard this from lots of people, and you realize actually a lot of people were just making it up. And I couldn't do it for probably a couple of years after I left that church, and I thought there was something really wrong with me. God had abandoned me, or I just wasn't good enough for God to put this, because it's a gift in the Bible. It's a gift, the gift of tongues. There's a lot of theological stuff that we could talk about, but this is not really the forum for it. But it's it's weird. It's a weird thing to understand. And kind of one of the other weird things about church, which a lot of people talk about all the time, when all the things that they don't get about religion, is tithing, right? And tithing is a lot of people's core tenet of Christianity. It's you giving 10% of your earnings, and there are all sorts of different theological debates about what that 10% actually means. And again, this is not the forum for it, but all we can really say from the perspective of this conversation is that was also something else that was kind of pushed on us. And so our parents have been very strong on this, and we had to, all the money that we had to give.
Looking back though, right, this was from our church journey, and when we were younger, like in the 90s, our parents giving 10% of their wage. Like, we were not a well-off family. I have memories of mum putting wads of cash into a little envelope to give to the treasurer. And I remember seeing it and being like gobsmacked. Like, we weren't the kind of family that could have bought lunches, for instance, or, we never went to McDonald's we very rarely ate out. No.
Mum would take sandwiches to even to restaurants and pull out a sandwich.
Like, we had lots of cool things, but we weren't without, but we definitely were not a well-off family.
Yep.
And I remember looking back, I'm like, that was a lot of money for them to be giving. And we were encouraged too, because we were given a little bit of pocket money, and we were encouraged to give 10% of that too, which I remember thinking, like, no, I don't want to give my money. I earned this.
Well, because the other thing with church, and not really in these early years for me, but when I got into larger churches, there was even more pressure to give beyond that. So you're not just giving 10%, you're giving, they're not saying give more, but they're saying just let God decide how much to give, with the clear inference, read between the lines, that he's probably going to tell you.
And some people would,
and then there'd be extra offerings on top of those normal tithing offerings, giving to special projects or things like that. And it does seem, and I see it now after not being in church for a while, that it does seem like that religion is obsessed with money. There's much more to it than that. You can't just look at it as a surface level. They just want money because it's such a core part of Christianity. It's more complex than that. But that pressure existed for us. Even
when you outside of the church, like we are now looking back, it's a hard pill to swallow when you see, for instance, the pastors driving a nice car, because their congregation are giving so much of their money towards, some people don't have much at all. Like, it should really just be, if you want to give, put in what you can, and if you can't, that's okay. It's about your heart.
And I think that the church has probably moved more in that direction now. to be honest, depending on the church that you're a part of. But at least for us growing up, it was very legalistic in those terms around money. And I don't know about you, but I still, at this stage in my life, wasn't questioning anything. Like, I don't think I would have been questioning these rules of religion or even the rules that mum and dad had for us. No. Because I was always that good boy, right? And it wasn't until I left home that I saw anything else. So even when some of my friends were doing questionable activities when I was young, I probably was more likely to judge them for being bad people than be tempted to do it on, myself.
But I think that's we would hear our parents judging them or their families or the way their parents would parent our friends, and and that's where the rules of you're not allowed to hang out with those people anymore came, because they are getting up to questionable, or their morals are questionable or whatever. So we were cut off from some people, actually. It sounds silly, but sometimes we would only be allowed supervised visits with some people. Like, we weren't allowed to hang out with them without our parents being there. Not like, can we hang out with so-and-so? Oh, no, not unless I'm there. It was just a feeling that, they weren't allowed to, we weren't allowed to hang out together alone with them because we might be influenced by their morals or lack of. I think there's a lot more to say in different chapters about how this this whole religious part affected us, and as we became adults, I think and started making our own decisions, it took on a different weight to it. So I think we'll probably save most of the content for that part of the podcast. But as we're talking about our teenage years, if I just bring it back to, when you're about 16, 17, when you're thinking about, you're about to leave school and kind of head off into the adult growing up world and starting to think about what you want to do when you leave school. And I was always very set on what I wanted to do. From a young age, I was going to be a pilot. So even through primary school, I was obsessed with flying, and it's not like I'd actually flown only a handful of times, but I started doing flying. I'll interrupt you there because it just triggered a memory of part of why we went to the South Island when we did was because of the Wanaka Air Show, because you were obsessed with flying. I think
we went twice actually, didn't we? To the Wanaka
and that was a big event.
I don't know why I forgot that. Yeah, that was huge. There's like
that was probably more for
warbirds over Wanaka, like some of the it was the biggest one in Australasia at that time, at least, for old World War planes and jets and stuff. It was pretty amazing.
Even I enjoyed that, and I found the war stuff boring that you're obsessed with, but I thoroughly enjoyed that. And we even got to fly in
DC-10, I think, or DC-3. Anyway, big old plane.
That was pretty cool.
I think I've touched on before, I was obsessed with war and obsessed with history and things like that. But at that stage, that didn't really have any impact on what I wanted to do. After I left school, I was just obsessed with being a pilot. And all through my primary years, early teenage years, wanted to do that, and started doing flying lessons at the age of...
You were 12.
12, was it?
Mm-hmm. Yep, you were 12.
And very, very lucky to get that experience. So super, super lucky.
I mean, that was cool that mum and dad supported that dream, were willing, because back then, I mean, I don't know how much the lessons were, but they wouldn't have been cheap.
They were from memory, it was around about $70 per lesson, which is quite cheap by today's standards, but back then it would have been a lot.
Yeah, it would have been a big investment for them,
Yeah,
for your dream.
The problem was that there were long gaps in between each lesson, because I guess looking back now, they just couldn't afford to do it all the time. And I don't know, I didn't really get anything. I wasn't getting anywhere. I wasn't progressing because I had such long time between lessons. And
it's crazy to think that a 12-year-old was flying a plane, though.
Yeah, and I did it all the way up until 14, 15, and I was old enough to go solo, but I just didn't have enough confidence or experience to do that. And then around about the age of 14, my eyes deteriorated quite badly, to the point where I could barely see the board or read my books or anything. So I had to get contact lenses, and that basically changed my life forever, and I couldn't become a pilot anymore.
And you found that quite life-changing, devastating.
Massive change, and quite late in development to be having to switch up ideas for things to do. And I just was really lost for about a year. Probably one of the reasons why I was saying to you offline how when I was 15, I was quite depressed, very unhappy. And it was probably connected with that, because I just lost all sense of purpose about what I wanted to do. Then I had a friend go to teachers college, and it just seemed like something that I could probably do. And so I just latched onto that. It was just the easiest thing, because I wasn't the type of person who could just kind of make things up as I went along. I needed a plan, desperate for a plan. But
you were also quite academic, so that probably suited your personality at the time. Like, it probably felt a natural progression.
Yeah, and I knew that I wanted to go to uni, and I was very, I don't know, I found school not easy is not the right word, but I didn't find school challenging, because I was just, as we discussed, it was all reading and books and stuff, and I was very good at that. And I scored very well through that ACE school system. And I definitely wanted to go to uni, and just going to teachers college was the first thing I could think of to become a teacher. I had no real interest in it, but it was just, I just kind of grabbed onto it because it was there. I mean, what about you? Because we didn't really talk much about this at the time. Even at home, we didn't talk about it a lot.
No. I guess for me, I went into early childhood education. I wasn't academic at school, and I struggled through school, even though it was easy in terms of reading. Like, I was good at reading. I don't know, I struggled. I would have loved to have been a vet. Like, that was probably my big dream, but I just didn't have the academic marks to follow through with that at all. I wasn't good at science or maths, which is obviously two of the main things you need to be a vet. But my other passion was children, and I, from a very young age, did, babysitting, and that was something that people always used to say to me, oh, you should be a teacher, or you should look after kids. So it was just kind of almost drilled into me from a young age. So when it came time to choosing, when I left school, I didn't have the confidence to go to uni because I already struggled at school. So I just kind of, looking back now, I wish I'd just pushed through those fears and done it anyway. But I ended up going to nanny school down in Wellington to train to be a nanny, which has served me well over the years. I've travelled sort of around the world doing that, but I wish that I had the Bachelor of Teaching.
Yeah. So I left home obviously a bit earlier than you did, and was desperate to get out. And I think probably that those last, from 16 to 17, all I thought about was being anywhere but around Kirikiri and in that little world that we had. Absolutely desperate to leave. And I had a very, what's the word? I suppose it was all the books that I was reading, but my mind was all over the place. I had all these adventures that I wanted to have and all the places I wanted to see, and I just felt like being at home was just holding me back. And it was about this time, I guess, you and I diverged a lot. Like, we didn't really talk much in those last couple of years, I don't think. And certainly when you left home, we weren't really communicating at all. So our next episode is going to be about leaving home. And
yeah, I feel like that's a whole other story, because we've got lots to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. There's probably a lot that I don't know about as well. And
but I have to say, though, when you left home, because how old were you? You 17?
17, yeah.
17, so I would have been like 15, 16, because we used to fight a lot at home, and, that was competitive siblings, and I was pretty mean. I was brutal.
We had, okay, just if we could just talk about this for a second. We had some full-on fights. People talk about siblings arguing or hating each other. We were all-out war. And we were pretty conniving. Me being the good boy, if I was going to do anything, I had to be really conniving about it, and really. And there are some pretty funny stories of the ways that I got you in trouble or whatever, and managed to get away with it. But I mean, you were pretty horrible.
I mean, I was a bitch basically, but it was usually like you weren't so understanding when I took your CDs or your comics. I just wanted to read them. You could have been more accommodating.
I mean, you didn't ask, you just took them.
Yeah, because I knew you wouldn't want me to have them. Anyway, we had we just did not get on at home. Anyway.
And like, I'm talking punching as well, like physical fighting. One particular memory of you throwing a hairbrush at my head and then knocking out a tooth.
Yeah, while you had braces, yeah. And also, like, I have a memory of you running down the stairs, like Mac-10, and I was trying to grab you. You didn't have a t-shirt on, and I grabbed you, and I just left claw marks down your back.
Yes, I do remember that. Oh, God.
But you were the kid that would always be like, "Mom, Bry's done this to me."
I just very, very clearly remember screaming at you. Well, and then coming inside and then screaming at Mum and Dad saying, "Why did you have to have a go?"
I didn't know you said that.
Yeah, it was pretty dark days.
But where I was going with that was that when you left home, it was weird. It was like something changed. And then, like, we didn't really talk when you were away. Did we have phones then?
I think right at the end. So my last year of school, I got a phone. I was quite resistant. You got one before I did.
I think I was Alcatel. 15. Yeah, those real old school Alcatel phones. We had to click 3 times to get to the letter you wanted.
And the screen was about, 3 inches.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if we were texting or anything while you're away, but I remember you coming home, like driving from Tauranga back up, which was like a 6-hour drive. You'd get back at like midnight and we'd stay up talking till really late. You talk about the girls you met and what things were happening in Tauranga. So I
don't remember those conversations, so please for the next episode, save them.
I don't remember specifics, but I do remember waiting up late for you to arrive back home so we could catch up. So I don't.
Yeah, the relationship definitely changed. Very interesting.
I don't know what it was. Maybe we just needed that space apart.
Well, all of a sudden I became like an adult, as people do when they leave home. Very interesting time, and I don't want to get too much into it now because that would be spoiling it for the next episode. But there's a lot of good content there in those uni years for sure, and a lot of stuff that we haven't really talked about before. So that would be quite an interesting time of life to cover. To be honest, I'll be honest, my uni years were pretty vanilla. So just preparing everyone for that. But yours perhaps a little bit more interesting than mine.
Yeah, I think lots happened for you. They might seem vanilla, but I think that was quite a poignant time in your life where you learned a lot.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of drama. Yeah. Different kind of drama.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. But lots to unpack there, but we'll save that for another day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, we'll probably finish it there, and then we'll pick up on those whole leaving home saga, and then perhaps we'll chat a little bit about what you were doing when I was at uni, and then vice versa. Thanks everyone for joining us for this episode, and tune in.
Congratulations if you've made it this far.
Oh, congratulations to us. Seriously. It's getting better. It's getting easier. So hopefully it sounds better, but I don't know. I'm crossing my fingers as I say this, that the quality is improving. Anyway, thanks for joining us, and we will see you again next time. Thanks.
Ka kite.